The name of the podcast is Završtane, which is translated to English is returning. And the idea is that we all go on a journey, and we all start at a certain place, and then we come back to our community, to our society, to give back. And what I'd like to do with both of you is to just go back to that moment in your life where you were living an ordinary life, life that maybe everybody expected you to live, but then something happened, and it doesn't have to be a war or anything like that, but something happened where suddenly you were yanked out of this ordinary life and you were set on a completely new journey.
I've been playing music since young years. I played clarinet, I played guitar and sang pretty much all the way until I stopped by the age of 17. Then I went to school, right? I studied in Moldova. I got a degree in international relations. But then when I moved to US at the age of 21, I started doing music again. I was working on the mountain in Colorado, and suddenly I realized I dedicated too much time to money aspect, or to something that's only physical. So I realized that some part of me is missing. I needed to something to change. I wanted my energy to shift, and I picked up the guitar and I started writing songs. So basically, while I was living in Colorado for the last 2 years, I started playing songs and playing open mics pretty much every day. And by the time I moved to Seattle, I already had enough music for the whole album. And when I moved to Seattle, I decided not to work too much, just 3 or 4 days a week. And that's what I did for the next 3 years, by playing music, writing music, and working on the side before I went to conservatory. So when I went to school, that became more serious after that. So I started dedicating a lot of time, training all the time, and since 2014, I pretty much never stopped developing my craft. In just in opera. I'm talking about just opera, because until 2014 there was mostly rock and roll and some other genres. So basically, classical music took over.
How about you, Dimitar? Tell us about the ordinary life.
Well, it's funny because this is actually a big theme, and when you said yanked out, when you used that word yanked out, it was quite literally how it happened. So I always played music since I was a kid. You know, I picked up guitar first and then got into classical piano. And this was just for fun. It was just so interesting to me. That's how I spent most of my time. You know, other kids were going out and playing in the sun during the summer, and I was at home trying to learn Chopin or whatever. But then it came time to, I graduated high school. All my friends went off to college, and I kind of felt left out, and I kind of went, like, I want to be a part of the world. I want to, join my peers. They're all going off to college. I should do the same. And I was thinking at the time, I said to myself, like, what's something creative but stable, something that has order, and you use that word too. And so I chose architecture. I went to school for architecture for a year at UW. And it's a really funny story. On the last day, I was supposed to present my final. That's all I had to do to finish the year. And I had it all ready, but the poster wasn't printing. So I went to a third party, like FedEx off-campus thing, and that printer didn't work. And I basically spent like 3 hours the whole afternoon trying to print this poster, and it just wasn't working. And I don't know if I took it as a sign back then, but I just was, my patience, I was done. And so I was sitting on the sidewalk in front of UW waiting for the next printer to open, because they were on like lunch break or whatever. And before they opened, I just got up and walked away from the school, and I never came back. And I left my backpack there. I left everything there. It was like I call it the quietest nervous breakdown that I've ever had. So I just that's how I left school. And then from that moment, I have had jobs, like Andre was saying, like 3 to 4 days a week. I try to make it a point to focus on music and, and just have a job to survive, to get me through, to buy my instruments and stuff. But yeah, I mean, last year I took the final plunge, like around January or this time. I decided, I can't go half and half. I have to go full 100% leap of faith into this career if it's going to work. I just knew it in my heart that, like, if it was going to work, I had to dive in 100%, and that's what I did last year. And luckily, I'm still here. I'm still alive. I have shelter and food in my fridge. But yeah, so I take it week by week now, and my main goal is to share what I think is in my heart, what I think is something special and divine, and my duty on this world, in this world, is to share it with the people, with you guys. And so that's what I do now. I've dedicated myself to the craft, and I consider myself a servant of music and a servant of the people.
There must have been mentors, teachers, and could be invisible beings, could be your own inner voice, but any could be nature. I don't know, anything that comes to mind. What are your mentors? And tell us maybe a story or memory, whatever comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I was lucky enough to live in mountains in Colorado, so I get to feel the nature. I think this was sort of a friend to me. But then I was lucky enough to have friends there too, and we still maintain long, friendship. Even though we live in different states, we still support each other, and I think this is very valuable, having the friends who are actually able to inspire you, and also I think to me they are like diamonds, like they precious, and I hope I can do the same to the same people too. So basically, it's people in my case.
But that is I love this about actually about this format of the show, because it's so amazing. Like, I mean, I had the idea to do it, but the answers that are coming are just so amazing. Friends, I would have never thought of that. Mentors, friends as mentors, but that's so beautiful. And I couldn't agree more with you how important, especially in these times, it is to come together and support each other. So thank you. And we go to Dimitar.
Yeah, Andrea's answers got me thinking too. I almost want to say a cop out answer, like, well, everything, but I'll try to get a little more specific, because yeah, I mean, that was a good answer. I like that. I have to say it started with my mom. Watching her play piano and sing. There's, when somebody's playing music, there's like a genre style that they play. There's their skill level, all that. But there was a certain aspect of my mom when I saw her play music that stuck out to me, and that's just how much she loved it, how much her heart was in every little note. In fact, when I was learning piano, I taught myself, but she would walk by. She didn't really, teach me, but she would walk. But she's like the Rick Rubin of classical piano. She'd walk by every once in a while and be like, "Dimitar, don't forget about the notes in between. Like, every note matters." And just, so, I mean, I have to say it started off with that. My mom was, a big influence in I would say the way that I got into music, how I listen to it, how I play it, how I approach it. And then, we're all creative people here, the three of us. We know how it goes. It's the self-doubt, the questioning whether, you're good enough, that kind of thing, whether it's right for you, whether you should pursue it as a career, all goes through your head. And so I think it's important, not that you have people that flatter you along the way, but people that encourage you and sort of, validate you. And And so my next one I'd have to say is my friend Leon, with whom I did the TV show The Kindness Diaries with. And, I'd feel discouraged every once in a while. And I think just randomly out of nowhere, he would send me emails saying, "You are a genius, man. The world needs your music. Never give up." Things like that. And he's all about kindness and about encouraging people. And so that really helped along the way too. I mean, I'd say he was a big confidence mentor to me. Like he was very important. I felt seen and heard. He really understood my music and loved it. And so, and then after that, I should say, yeah, the fans, the people that have wrote me, messages and where my music has been important to them, that has helped me along the way. My musical influences, I've learned so much from them. Similar thing to my mom, watching how much they care about the craft and how much they serve the craft, and that inspires me. So it's a little bit of everything, but those are a few of the specifics. Yeah.
Was there a moment in your life when you faced your worst fears, when in a sense you died to yourself and you were you rose from the ashes and into another self? But just talk about facing your worst fears. I know it's not your regular podcast where we just talk about the weather, but why not? Why not go straight to the core
It is
of
quite the
what?
weather we're having, though, right?
Right? I know it's really amazing. I love it.
Should I go first?
Sure, it looks like you're ready.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, yeah. I mean, it's like how real do I want to get? How deep do I want to get? I think about just going back to this leap of faith idea. It's funny because my biggest fear in life changed. When I was growing up, being from Bulgaria and trying to assimilate to this culture, to fit in, to be like my peers. My biggest fear was being left out. My biggest fear was like not fitting in, not being a part of the world, just kind of experiencing the world from the outside and never really having a place for me. And that kind of followed me all through my childhood, which is kind of why, I really ended up going to UW, ended up going to school. It was so that I wasn't left out, but I want to kind of I want to go on a little tangent in the middle of this answer to say I'm so appreciative of you, Bogdan, for kind of going out of your way to bring me back into my Bulgarian roots. That sometimes I feel like, I still cook the food and speak the language and all that, but I feel like you're making an effort to bring me like further back into my roots, and I really appreciate that, because the more I go back into those roots, the more I remember, kind of like I put together puzzle pieces that have been missing, and it's like, oh, this is who I really am, and the more puzzle pieces I put together of myself, like the better picture and the more complete I could feel, even in my approach, just in my music and in other things. But back to the answer. My fear changed from being left out and not a part of the world to, I had this dream. This really happened. I had a dream a few years back. I had like a really safe, nice full-time job. I loved it. It was a great job, but I had this dream. Where I was like an old man. I was like in my 80s or something, and I was on my deathbed. Not to make it dark, but it wasn't a dark thing. It was just like, I had lived a nice, good life, and I was on my deathbed. My kids were there, my grandkids were there, and I was like crying, and I was like crying, and there was this like deep sadness in the dream that I was really feeling this feeling, and my kids and grandkids were like, "What's wrong?" And I couldn't stop crying enough to like explain it to them. When I woke up and thought about it, I feel like that feeling of sadness was that I kind of had, in the middle of my life, had thought that life would just last forever, and that I could always share my gift, later on. Like I need to perfect it first. I need to get perfect at piano. I need to get my voice perfect, and I'll just share my gift later. I'll start making music later. And then and it was really sad. And that's what this, my biggest fear became, that I grow old and I never tried because I was scared, because I wanted stability and I wanted comfort. And because of that, my life passed me by, and I didn't get to share this thing that I feel was like a gift inside of me. And so that became my biggest fear. And um, I made some changes and I shifted priorities. And like I said, I left my job pretty much because of that feeling and a couple other signs that came my way. Um, but I feel like now I don't act out of that fear. Like, that fear helped me shift the priorities, but now I'm acting out of love. I'm excited at the challenges. I'm not scared of the challenges. I'm excited about them. It comes from love, but it was a shift there that happened, and so that became my biggest fear.
If it's my turn, right?
Yes, it is your turn, my friend. You're not getting out of speaking about your fear.
Yes. So, as he mentioned, as Dimitar mentioned, being an immigrant and not even knowing the country, or kind of having an idea that you know it, and trying to understand what are your boundaries, it's quite a challenge, I would say. Everyone who went this route, right, to be an immigrant, they face certain fears. That's for sure. And for for me, maybe it's not just part of being immigrant only, but I think since I was growing up, I was always put in some sort of box by the environment I was having, and inside a lot of times I was resisting it. But as I grew older, my resistance grew up. Resistance to fit into some sort of category or society, and it grew up to the point where I really felt that I had to embrace the gift, or the idea of being an artist. Because for a lot of years I've been doing music, but I was still rejecting the fact that I have maybe the power or the gift doing it. So embracing that, until letting go of the fears of taking a courage to embrace your art, I would say. That was the biggest fear, because you always compare yourself to the people around you or the things around you, and you realize pretty much no one understands you, unless the people who do art, or unless people who do some other, maybe let's say not traditional creative jobs. And this is when I think the fear goes once you practice, and the confidence grows with that too. And through that, obviously, you will find what I was finding. This is mentors, supporters, and friends who were on the same page in this journey.
The last question is, and I think that you both touched on this a little bit, but it's about your superpowers and svrksivota, and the gifts that you're bringing back to your community. Because we talked about your journey, living the ordinary life, the mentors, facing your fears, and what can you touch on? What are those superpowers within you, and then what are you bringing back to community, or you want to give back to the world?
I think I have a thought. Superpower is such a mythical, right? Something sort of magic word that has a lot of place to speculate about it. But in my opinion, I think it's managing the emotions. This is probably the biggest thing for me, was that I would call superpower. Being friends with your emotions, and access actually emotional capital, emotional wealth. And I think through that, in my case, I find the word superpower.
Oh, that's really wonderful. Again, unexpected, and I wanted to bring the superpower theme to this podcast because of how in Hollywood you're always just bombarded with one kind of superpower. But I feel that music is superpower. So is you spoke beautifully to becoming a master of your emotions. So superpowers can take many ways, many forms. So thank you for that. And how about you, Mitko?
I think that was a beautiful answer. Really managing the emotions, learning that all the emotions matter. I'm gonna have to hop on the Andre train because when I started learning how to do that, and paying attention to that, um, even things like, kind of thinking of a personal philosophy for yourself. What are the things you believe in? A few years ago, I wrote down on a piece of paper, like just a bunch of notes of like, what are the things that make me me? What do I believe in? What does this life mean to me? And I actually listened to another podcast that where they instructed to do this, and I thought it was a great idea to kind of create a sentence that you feel is your personal philosophy. What's your mission statement for life? And then making decisions based on that. And so it started with that, but it also, I love what Andre said, because I think the closest thing that we could get to a superpower is learning how to manage emotions and give space for all of them. Um, because with that, I mean, you can quite literally rewire your brain, to help you get through the bad times and the good. I think it's just a really powerful thing. Um, I think another thing for me is like, and this is kind of what wonder was about. I like the word wonder. I didn't really think too much about you know, what it means at the time where I chose that album name, but I guess I just thought of like another superpower. And I would say, personally, to me, my biggest superpower is keeping that childlike magic, curiosity, wonder in your heart, and never losing that, and nurturing that, and trying to keep that alive. Because as adults, we can start to get cynical and practical, and practical is a good thing. But just learning how to keep that alive in us, that part in us that when we were a kid we saw magic and wonder in the world. Keeping that childlike energy alive in you is like a superpower too, because you remember, when I could sit down on a piano 100 times and be like, write a song that'll sound good and make you a lot of money, but it isn't until I sit down at the piano and kind of approach it like I used to when I was like curious about it, and it was like the world was ahead of me, like that's when the good songs come out. So I think that'll be mine.